women with ADHD are brilliant. We're smart. We are problem solvers. We're creative. We think outside the box. But if we don't understand our brain and learn how to work with it and give it what it needs, which is also love and care and nurture and being able to slow down and rest, then that's where we'll hit the wall.
Hello, and welcome to the Ambitious Women of Color podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Lynn Rojas. In this episode, we're talking about something I wish more people understood: ADHD and high achieving women, especially women of color, who are often underdiagnosed, overworking to compensate, and burning out at a faster rate. My guest is Brenda Miranda, ADHD coach and therapist who helps ambitious women follow through without the daily chaos and burnout. We're talking about why traditional productivity advice doesn't work for ADHD brains, how masking shows up at work, and what it actually takes to build a sustainable career when your brain works differently. If you ever felt like there's something wrong with you because focus feels impossible or you can't stay organized no matter how hard you try, this episode's for you. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Hi, Brenda. How are you?
Hi, I'm really excited. Thank you so much for having me here.
I'm so excited to have you here, especially for today's topic. So, before we jump on, let's start with the signature question. What's one thing you refuse to sacrifice for your career?
My health. Yeah, that is one thing that's really important to me based on my past experiences, but I would say my health and my family as well.
Yes, no, that's so important. I mean, without like having good health and being around the people you love, then everything else it doesn't matter, right? So let's get started. So you're an ADHD coach and therapist, and you were diagnosed later in life in your 30s with ADHD. So I want to start there because I feel like a lot of listeners might be sitting and wondering if they have ADHD or maybe that's something that they've thought. So tell us about your journey to diagnosis and what changed for you when you finally understood how your brain worked differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually a therapist, so I'm a therapist, and I've worked with children with ADHD as long with autism, and I was able to diagnose it in other people, but I didn't see it in me. And so it wasn't until I got married, and as you may know, typically like the ADHD symptoms and behaviors were just pretty normal for me and my family. But it wasn't until I got married that I started to realize that maybe some things, how I was showing up wasn't as typical. And so my diagnosis actually was about 3 years ago, and I was 36. And how that happened to be was I always like to call it my Cinderella story. It was my sister's wedding, and of course, she calls me and she's like, "Hey, Brenda, I just want you to know that, make sure you bring everything you need, your license, all the things." And so I did my very best to bring everything that I needed. And to make the story short, right when we were about to go to church, I was missing a shoe. And of course, like I double checked at all my systems for me to make sure that I had everything in place. And ADHD happens and I didn't have my shoe. And so that just brought me back a lot of my childhood memories because I was
Hmm.
the one that would usually forget something or made, other people inconvenience, and I felt really bad, as you can imagine, because it was my sister's wedding, and now we were stressed because now it was like, anybody has an extra shoe? I had left it in, the hotel that I was in, not at the hotel my sister was at, so it was just a mess, but I that's why I call it my Cinderella story, and from that
Yeah.
moment on, I'm like, "Okay, this is not typical. There's something here that's happening in my brain that's not just me being careless, or it's not just me not caring." And so that's
Hmm.
when I had a conversation with my current therapist and said, like, I need to get diagnosed because I think it is ADHD. So I think it was just a moment of me realizing and accepting that there was
Hmm.
something that was just not typical.
And besides like that story, like now that you know this, like going back and making sense out of your upbringing, making sense of like maybe how you navigated school, how you navigated career and grad school, like how looking back, like what have you reflected on or how do you make sense of like what everything was going on for you?
Yeah. So when you're late diagnosed with ADHD, it can go either way, right? I think you can have a lot of grief.
Hmm.
Like, what if I would have known? How come I didn't know sooner? What would have my life would have been like? if I would have got the support that I needed. But for me, I think it was an answered prayer. I think for a really, really long time, and I think that's also part of why I became a therapist because I've always been really curious about the brain and
Mhm.
neuroscience and human behavior. So for me, it was really just a relief. I really knew something was wrong. I don't know what it was. I thought it was just like my character flaw. Like it's just me not trying hard enough.
Mhm.
But since childhood, I knew something was off. I couldn't explain it. And I was too ashamed to share with other people. And especially being a Latina, first generation Latina, like my parents just didn't know that. They just didn't know. And so I think it just got like lost in the cracks. In terms of academics, that was really something I truly struggled with. Although it was something that interests me because I love learning, but it was
Mhm.
academics was something I really suffered with, but people didn't quite see that. It was a lot of like hidden late night studying and working 10 times harder than my peers just to get a passing grade. But I think I have great work ethics and I
Mhm.
always learn how to push through. I grew up playing softball. And so I got a scholarship to a university. So that was always something that I like. I was always goal oriented, but I can definitely tell you that I mask. And in doing that, that obviously hurt my self esteem. It hurt
Mhm.
my identity of who I thought I was. And although I was accomplishing and achieving my goals, it was at a cost of my health. It was at a cost of how I was feeling about myself. And I think like that looking back, I'm like, if I would have known, things were probably, I would have gone to support I needed. But you know, when you know, it all makes sense though, because now I get to help women who've gone through very similar things as me. And if I didn't get late diagnosed with ADHD, then I probably wouldn't be the one to help you. But I'm super grateful and I'm very proud of myself for what I've been able to achieve despite of the challenges that I went through. You know, not only that, but with ADHD, you have other diagnoses that
Mhm.
goes with it along, right? So there's a very high percentage between 50 to 75% that if you have ADHD, you're most likely going to have another diagnosis. And so that is like depression, it's anxiety, that is trauma. And I definitely went through the depression and anxiety as well.
That's That's crazy how, like you said, that also comes with something else. I definitely know a lot of people that were diagnosed really late in their life, like in their 30s as well. And most recently, someone I know really closely shared that she got diagnosed with ADHD and and anxiety. So I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then we started talking about like, what were the things growing up that you experienced and you thought like something was different, but you never knew anything about neurodivergence. You didn't know anything about like any of those conditions to even think that that's what it was. It was more thinking that there was something wrong with you, but you just went through life like navigating it that way. So it's really great that you get to help women and help them because it's like you understand. It's not just like you studied the condition and you're studying how it impacts people, but it's like you've lived that. So it helps even more when the person that's supporting you understands like what you're going through and can help like really come up with tools and strategies that are going to be successful for you. So it's not just like theory, it's not just like, education, but it's a lived experience. So that's pretty amazing.
Right. Yeah, it is. And I think I also want to answer your question too. Like what changed? Everything changed. I think that like I was in therapy for almost 10 years and no one caught it. I didn't have a conversation with any of my therapists to be like, hey, this may be ADHD. And I think that like when you are in therapy for so long, I mean, part of it is because I'm a therapist myself. So
Hmm.
I'm like, you gotta practice what you preach.
Yeah, therapists need
Right.
therapists too.
Yeah. And so for me, it was always like I just always needed someone to also hold space for me as well while I'm doing the work. But as soon as I got diagnosed and I started learning more about ADHD, learning how it presented in me because it doesn't look the same in everyone.
Hmm.
There are different subcategories and also depending on like your culture, depending if you're a woman or a man, it just varies. It doesn't look the same. And so when I started understanding like how this for me and how I'm experiencing it, not only did it help me, but also help like my marriage. It helped my family like understand where I was coming from. It helped my friendships. Like it helped for me being able to make decisions from a place of the ADHD lens. So I'm like, okay, what is going to help me being able to function better based off of
Mhm.
my condition. And I think that I started to make a lot of choices and decisions in my life from that place. So either it be like how much I exercise, what food do I eat, my boundaries, like how can I set myself up so that my brain can thrive in the way that it best can. And I think that's what changed everything for me, and I started seeing progress like within the first 6 months. And so that's why I'm, like, very passionate and advocate for, particularly women to understand themselves, their hormones, their body, and being able to change the narrative of who they thought they were and who they are, and really to be able to see their brilliance despite of their challenges. And I think that first, like if you didn't know how to work with your brain, understand it, provide systems and structure that helped for you to be able to access your strengths, like you're going to
Mhm.
struggle. And not to say that like you don't struggle, but the how you do it and how you treat yourself is different. And I think that that is something that like I want all women who have ADHD to experience.
I love that. And I love the way you said, because for you, and I'm sure for many, it's not just the label, not just like, okay, now I know, now I understand my brain. It's beyond that. It's now you can make sense of why and put those systems in place for yourself to be successful. So I love that, sharing it with your family. Now they're able to have grace and know, like, oh, you're not just being forgetful because you don't care. You're being forgetful because of your condition, but you want to be successful and set yourself up for success. So you set those systems in place. And I know we'll probably dive into it too, but I just love that you use that as like that was the way for you to be successful and see so much like improvement and changes because you're like, okay, this is how my brain works. Let me do things and set systems in place so that I can like taking into account being intentional and then, setting yourself up for success. So I love that. So yeah, so I want to dive into, because I feel like for the audience, I'm sure it's really important to understand a lot of them and a lot of the women that I work with, they're like high achievers, they're trying to get promoted or they've, been promoted and trying to continue to get up, to the next level. They perform well, they're checking all the boxes but they feel exhausted or they have trouble focusing or they can't keep up with basic things that seem easier for other people. And, there's like the assumption of what you think that the stereotypical, ADHD person is like a hyperactive kid, right? So, how does ADHD look like in high achieving women? Because a lot of my audience are high functioning and might not even realize that they might be neurodivergent.
That's a great question. I think that with women, particularly, this is really interesting. So, impulsivity, I think we often think that it looks like this hyper kid bouncing off the walls, right? Or a um, girl who is in class and she's talking a lot or being disruptive. But in actuality, as we get older, for some women, impulsivity actually looks like your mind is racing. So, impulsivity is in your body. You feel restless, but you're actually staying still. For some that may be like being fidgety or like tossing and turning, but it's not necessarily the case. And I think that's where it becomes difficult to identify, and it can get ADHD can really get mistaken for anxiety as well as depression and core, like there is that core mobility, but sometimes it's not only anxiety that's causing it, right? And
Hmm.
so with high achieving women and ambitious women, so actually impulsivity looks like ambition, right? So it's like you are striving for a goal because that stimulates your brain. You're setting yourself up to another level. So it's a new challenge. And when we are like, oh, there's a new challenge, there's like novelty. It's new or
Hmm.
you're expanding and that gives you dopamine. And so then so that looks in the form of wanting to get to the next step. okay, so I want to go into, I'm a leader. And then it's like, okay, I want to be a program manager. And a lot of women are like, I just, why am I not happy with where I
Mhm.
am? Like, why do I need to be wanting more? And one of the things I used to really judge myself for was that. I was being really ambitious and wanting to like go up the ladder, the corporate ladder very quick. And I would even get that from my family, right? They're like, "Hey, like, can't why are you always striving for more? Like, chill, relax. Like, why do you have to go to the next level?" And now looking back, I'm like, "Oh, okay, like this is actually part of my brain because," and like I had mentioned, and so I think that it can look very like you're masking, right? It can look like you're ambitious, you go into you're going to the next level,
Mhm.
but inside of you, you can also feel very restless and exhausted and tired and feeling like you're not good enough, chasing the next thing because it is giving you dopamine. And so there's that. And it just like sometimes we definitely, especially for in like your careers,
Mhm.
we do tend to, like I always say, like when you have ADHD, like you work 10 times harder to be
Mhm.
able to accomplish the same goal that a neurotypical person does. That's just the way it works. And I'm like, and we also get to celebrate 10 times harder because of the amount of effort, the amount of energy that went into that. And I think part of it is understanding that, hey, I'm going to need to work harder because how my brain functions and really being like, I'm okay with that. But at the same time, it's like, we also need to take care of ourselves, right? And I think
Mhm.
that's where we go into burnout. And I think that because we need to work 10 times harder, and this is what I mean by that. What I mean by that is like we got to check our calendars more time than not, right? Because we got to make
Mhm.
sure that, or we thought that we sent the email and we actually didn't, or there was a typo and you didn't mean to, so now you're feeling uneasy or you feel like, what are people going to think about me? And so then that turns into perfectionism. And so now you're over here taking extra trying to double, triple check. Now you're second guessing. Now you're in self doubt. And so then what that does is that now you have to stay longer at work so you can make up for it. And then also too, like when you have ADHD, your energy fluctuates. So one day you're all in and you're hyper focused and you feel really good about it. And the next day you can hardly get yourself to send the email that you need to send out. So it's just like, this is what I mean by how, I mean, women with ADHD are brilliant. We're smart. We are problem solvers. We're creative. We think outside the box. But if we don't understand our brain and learn how to work with it and give it what it needs, which is also love and care and nurture and being able to slow down and rest, then that's where we'll hit the wall.
You said so much that I'm like, oh my God, I feel so seen. But it's like, I'm not diagnosed with ADHD, but I'm like, you're describing me so much. So, okay, note to self, I need to get diagnosed, but, or, assessed, right? So just in talking about this, like I love how you were able to describe like what does this look like for someone who may be struggling with this and might not know what to do. And I know there's so much advice out there, like how can you manage your time, manage your productivity, manage your energy. And maybe there's women that have tried those things and the productivity systems or planners or just focus strategy, and it's still they either feel like that's not working for them. Feel like sometimes maybe they might be thinking is a discipline problem or a motivation problem. Like, why doesn't traditional productivity advice work for ADHD brain? And how will you differentiate between discipline or motivation when it's actually just the way that the brain works?
Yeah. So the reason why most neurotypical productivity advice does not serve if people with ADHD is because they're expecting for your energy to be consistent. And when you have ADHD, this is what I learned the very first year I started to really focus and specialize with people with ADHD. I started just noticing this exact pattern. And this is the reason why I created a guide, the energy, ADHD energy guide, because your energy is going to fluctuate and it's not your fault. It's just how your brain is wired
Mhm.
because your dopamine, so dopamine is a neurotransmitter that's responsible for your working memory, for your focus, for motivation, for pleasure, and for reward. I like to think about it, it's like a Wi-Fi. So when you have a Wi-Fi, sometimes you're going to have strong connection and sometimes you're going to have weak connection. Now
Mhm.
with dopamine, because the way that someone with ADHD, the way that we receive and extend, so we receive the dopamine, but also gets out of our system, it's unpredictable because our brain is interest based. And so we quite don't know what we're going to be interested in from day to day. Right.
Mhm.
So you can be interested in something and then it gets really boring and you're not interested anymore. So this is the reason why like you start a hobby and you get all excited, you go and you buy all the things and then a week later, you're like, what? I don't want to do it anymore. And so because we're interest based brain, we're going to focus on what we're interested in. And anything that's boring, we're going to then put away, right? It's going to be harder for us to be able to focus on that. So that's what I mean. Like the dopamine is inconsistent. We don't know how we're going to activate it from day to day. And so that being said, going back to the analogy of the Wi-Fi, it's like dopamine is there, focus is there. Like it's not like you can't focus, right? But the connection sometimes is strong, sometimes it's weak. And you don't quite know when you're gonna have that strong connection. And that can be frustrating, right? You're just like you're expecting to get up in the morning, you're expecting to have the energy that you need for you to be able to accomplish your responsibilities and you're just like, I don't have the motivation. I just, it's so hard for me to get started. And other times you have no problem starting. And so I think that in understanding that, part of the system is being able to plan for your different energy levels. And so this is a framework that I created and not to get like, because it'll take time for me, but
Yeah.
what I call it is there's the rabbit zone, there's the squirrel zone, and there's the turtle zone. And so that incorporates like the different zones that you're going to be in. And so sometimes you can be in the rabbit zone, you're hyper focusing, you're all in, you're locked in. It's like, let's roll, let's go. And that can be what people would call that can be your superpower, that can be your leverage. But if it's not contained and leveraged in a way that works for you, it actually can work against you because
Mm.
that's where we get a dopamine crash. So you're using all the dopamine that you have without like putting boundaries to be able to save your energy for later. And so what that does is that you use up all your dopamine. Then after you get a dopamine crash, you're tired and you're exhausted, and then you go into the turtle zone. And in the turtle zone, that's what I would call it, is when it's when you recover. But oftentimes for women with ADHD, this is when we have brain fog. This is when we rather buffer. We'd rather not like feel. We're squirreling. We're sluggish. It's hard to get going. But instead of using that as a recovery, we judge ourselves in that zone. Like, how was it that just yesterday I was able to focus, I was all in, and then today I don't even want to look at that thing again. And so in the turtle zone is where we shame ourselves, we beat ourselves up oftentimes, and we judge ourselves. And so that it's not recovery for us, right? We're just
Mhm.
shaming ourselves for slowing down versus like utilizing the turtle zone for recovery, for nourishment. And so oftentimes we kind of fall between these two. So the rabbit zone, full focus, hyper focus, all in, using up all my energy. Then you go to a dopamine crash, and then you find yourself in the turtle zone, which is like hard for you to get moving. And don't get me wrong, we love ourselves in the rabbit zone. We just do. We're like, how can I get into the rabbit zone 100% of the time? Because that girl, she's a
She gets
baddie.
things
Like I love
done.
that. I love her, you know. And then when we're in the turtle zone, we're like, we judge that version. She's lazy. She just can't do anything. Like she's just so irresponsible, right? And not only that, but when we're on the turtle zone, we also get those messages from other people as well, right? So for me, it's like incorporating, like realizing that you're going to fall within those different zones. And in the middle is what we call the squirrel zone, which is a mixture of both. So this is like the middle ground. So the best way that the ADHD brain works is being able to use a little bit of both. However, you can be productive in all three zones. They all have a purpose, right? And so I think the goal overall is how can I be more regulated in every zone? How can I be intentionally in my nervous system? How can I be regulated when I'm in the rabbit zone? How can I be regulated when I'm in the turtle zone? And how can I be regulated when I'm in the squirrel zone? So the squirrel zone is what I would call it. It's like it's a sprint and pause, sprint and pause. Rabbit zone is when you do marathons and you're just going, right? And the turtle
Mhm.
zone is just like you're just stuck. And so the squirrel is like you want to be able to. This is where the systems comes in place. So yes, like being able to work for 90 minutes max
Mhm.
until you have like until you take a break. Now this can work different in different people. For some people they work in increments of 20 minutes and that works for them. For other people it's like no, that's just like too much transition. Ideally the research shows 60 minutes, but then I have ADHD, so let's push it a little bit. I'm like, okay, fine, let's go. Let's do 90 minutes. But after that, like no more. And so I think it's like between, 60 to 90 minutes. And after that, you absolutely need to take a break because if not, you're going to find yourself in the rabbit zone, over exhausting your energy and your focus. And so that's part, and like neurotypical productivity advice, like they think that your energy is going to be, it's going to look like this.
Mhm.
And that's the reason why it doesn't work because when you think about planning ahead of time, when you think about being on time, time management, when you think about like being able to start and finish projects, you need to think about the different energies that you're going to be in. So planning for the version of you that's going to be in the turtle zone, planning for that version of you that's going to be in the rabbit zone, and being able to support yourself in any zone that you're in.
Yeah, you mentioned that like having a regulating nervous system. How does your nervous system play with your brain when you have ADHD? Like, how does it impact? I know you said in all three zones you have to have a regulated system, or you need to plan for like maybe it's a bit of planning and a bit of regulating your system while you're in those zones. Like, how do they work together?
Yeah, so how they work together is that when you feel like you have more control over your energy and over your time and over your calendar, right? Like you're going to feel more regulated. So it goes hand in hand. So it's like if you have understanding that okay, like my energy is not going to be steady 100% of the time.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, I'm gonna incorporate and plan for me to be all into all three different zones. Then you're not like shaming yourself or beating yourself up or making yourself wrong because of what zone you're in. And that is huge because when we are operating in survival mode, where we're in this constant rush, rush, pull, 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 I gotta do, urgency, urgency, pressure, pressure. What that does is that we have less dopamine. So the idea here is that we want to be able to have that strong connection, right? Like
Hmm.
the Wi-Fi connection. And when we are not- when operating in flight or flight mode, it makes it a lot harder to have access to dopamine to help you focus because your cortisol levels are up, your adrenaline levels are up. And it's interesting because we think that, well, I'm good with procrastinating, right? Due to the last minute, I have to wait until my stress levels go up. I have to wait until the adrenaline goes up in order for me to focus. And I think that, sometimes we're not gonna have control over that. And we can use it as leverage, but we can't depend on us having to be in the rabbit zone 100% of the time to get something done because that's not how our brain operates. And so when it comes so when we are more regulated, it helps and then like understanding like, oh, okay, when I'm in the turtle zone, how can I support myself? So that may look something like a bath, that may look like journaling, that may look something like going for a walk, taking a nap. So that helps regulate your nervous system because you're
Hmm.
connecting to your body, to what you need. And in turn, it's creating safety because you're connecting with you and you're giving yourself what you need with love and compassion versus abandoning yourself just to get something done.
Yeah, I love that. And I love people definitely, if you need support, go to Brenda. I love like how you are able to put it in to ways that you can understand and really show the different zones that you can be in and the different what is that going to require from you when you're in that area of your energy. And I know you mentioned that for a lot of women with ADHD, they could either burn out. I'm sure you mentioned masking, right? So you are in an environment, especially I want to say women of color, right? Not only
Mhm.
do you need to be code switching or working harder to be seen, but also if you have ADHD, that's another layer of complexity. So you mentioned that you could be masking and that could be leading to exhaustion, that could be leading to burnout. If also women are struggling with maybe tasks that take longer for them, that's also going to lead to overwork and burnout. So, what is like the personal cause of the high performance when you have ADHD?
Yeah, I think part of it is, like, sometimes that's just who we are. Like, if you're an ambitious woman, that's just who you are. And I think part of it is just, like, accepting that and owning it. Like,
Mhm.
I love to be the best. I love to be on top. I love performing. It makes me feel good. I love who I am when I am performing at a high level. And I think especially as a woman of color, that can be hard to do because it's like,
Mhm.
oh, you've got to be humble, right? Why do you want more if this is what you have? So, or you feel afraid to ask for more because, like, what if I don't get it? And so
Mhm.
I think part of it is it's just owning that that's part of you and that's what you love and that's okay and giving yourself permission. And I think also too, like, at the cost, the personal cost, I
Mhm.
think that is it's the intention. So if our intention is if we are seeking our goals, like high
Mhm.
performing, if it comes from having to prove our self-worth, it comes from having to be recognized and validated for other people, and
Mhm.
if we base our value based off of our achievements, I think that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
Because then there's always going to be more that we're wanting, and we're putting our self worth in someone else's hands versus doing it because it gives us pleasure, because we want to make an impact in the world, because we're being called, because it's your purpose. And I think that, when you don't have ADHD, when you're undiagnosed with ADHD,
Mhm.
most of the time, like, you had to mask your way in order to be where you're at. Like, first of all, you didn't know that about yourself. So you're already judging yourself. You're already thinking there's something wrong with you. Why are you going to let other people know that about you? Right? Like, you're getting by and you have your internal struggles, but there's vulnerability in letting someone else know that you are struggling. And
Mhm.
so on the outside, some people may look you on paper and be like, "Wow, you're successful. You achieved this. Good job." But when you are drowning and you're burned out and you're like, "Yeah, but I'm not getting sleep. My relationships suck.
Mhm.
I want to be married and I don't even have time to date." Then even when you're getting the validation, if you don't validate yourself, then that's where we fall into the loop of having to work harder, having to prove yourself, and then it'll never be enough. And so when you start releasing the mask, and don't get me wrong, like, sometimes I think we do need to put on a mask, right? Uh, but I think that if that's intentional, you're just
Mhm.
like, I'm
Like your alter ego to help
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah, and I think that sometimes you do, and I don't think that's always a bad thing, but
Mhm.
I think you do need to know and recognize that it is a mask and that you're okay with that, right? And also learning when to not use a mask. And I think that either way, you love and you accept yourself no matter what. But I do think it's at a cost of our health and it's at a cost of relationships. That's the 2 things that I see a lot.
And how can they move forward with their ambition and wanting to grow in their career in a healthy way so that they can be intentional and strategic about it without it impacting their health, their relationships?
Yeah. I know this may sound too simple, but simple is not always easy. But I think it's just really deciding and connecting to your values. Like, what do you value? If you value your health, if you value family, if you value relationships or connection, than connecting to that value, right? Because we are, as a woman, like we're not only career oriented women, right? We're not only business women. We are also a daughter. We are also a wife. We are also a mother. We're also a friend. And I think that keeping that in mind, that like what else is important to you, and connecting to your values has been something that's been really helpful for me, because you're always going to be kind of be pulled into different
Mhm.
directions. And so one of the things that when I left my I was burnt out on my previous job before I left, I made a promise to myself when I made the transition to be a full-time entrepreneur. I said, I'm going to build my body and my business at the same time. And so I think it's more like a both and an and. Like, it doesn't have
Mhm.
to be either or all or nothing. I think it's really finding the both and the and. Like, how can two things be true at the same time?
Yeah. And I've loved seeing your journey because I mean, I see on your stories and your Instagram that you are always, talking about how, how you're incorporating fitness, how you're disciplined, and how this is like discipline and self love for you. So I love that you are a product of your product, right? You're showing like, hey, I'm doing this work too. Like, I am intentional about my workouts and, being disciplined and destigmatizing that disciplines because I think it's like, so many women, they might struggle with the whole even term discipline because you feel shame if you don't, keep going. And actually, like one of the ways that I've actually changed that the association because I had that too, where it's like I'm disciplined and then when I'm falling behind, then I shame myself. So one of the ways that I was able to shift it and you talk about it this way too, but I focus more on like I'm devoted because because devotion, it just looks different than like your, strict, rigid disciplines that, or at least like when you think more of like military, like, everything needs to be down to the T. But by reframing it, at least for me, thinking of it devotion, like devotion comes from love. It comes from like self respect, from like, I get to do this. So, like, I would love to talk about your definition and how you use discipline to be able to help you be successful.
I love, love, love. I love this topic. I that's a great like devotion. I love that. I love that. But I also feel like that goes into the category of soft discipline. So I growing up, I would get that a lot. Like, you're so disciplined. You're so just like even in the workplace where I've been. And I never believed it. I just never believed it, right? Because I'm like, you don't know. I struggle. Like I I don't even know where I left my phone. Like, I don't even know my name right now. Like, there was just so much that I was just like, I am just not disciplined. But looking back, absolutely, I have been. Right? Like, how did I get 2 degrees? How do I become licensed? How did I get a scholarship playing as a softball athlete to a D1 university? And, like, that's, like, the highest of the highest, and I
Yeah.
performed at that level, so, like, I had some level of discipline. Now I but here's the difference between the 2, because I do believe I'm a little controversial, because I for me, it's like, even if I have ADHD, there's no limits. Like, I just choose to believe that. That's just it serves me. Like, if there was no limits for me before I got diagnosed with ADHD, because I believe anything is possible with God, anything is possible, and that's what got me to where I'm at. Why, now that I'm diagnosed with ADHD, why would I choose to believe that I cannot be disciplined? Why would
Hmm.
I choose to believe that I cannot be disciplined? I mean, that I cannot be disciplined. That doesn't make sense to me, because those are the things that I've been working towards. So I'm like, yes, I have ADHD, I struggle, and the way that I get there looks different, but that doesn't mean I can't get there. And so that's how I work with my clients as well. So I do believe you could be consistent and you could be disciplined, but how that looks like is different. How you get there gets to be different. And so, very much like you, discipline for me was like very strict, very rigid, very hard. And that's kind of how I knew to be disciplined, right? As an athlete, but also I was just always so hard on myself. And that's how I got myself to do things. I got myself to do things by being hard on myself. And that's like the only way I knew how to do it before I got diagnosed. And after I got diagnosed, I'm like, wait, what? There's another way to get stuff done that's not like beating myself up? Like, what? how? And I think that and that's where I started learning more about it, but devotion kinda goes into the category of soft discipline. So I think many of us with ADHD, we kinda grew up learning the hard, especially women of color,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
hard discipline. It's very rigid, there's no flexibility, it's all or nothing, either you did it or you didn't do it, and you didn't do it right. And so or like discipline means that you have to be consistent, you gotta do it for like 6 months in a row, and if you didn't do it for 6 months in a row, that means you're not. And so it's very all or nothing. Soft discipline actually is there's still discipline involved, okay? So we still get to do something and finish if we wanna get the results. I mean, we want abs, we gotta, we still want discipline, right? But
Yeah.
but it's like but soft discipline means that we are devoted, just like you mentioned. We are kind, we're compassionate, we're loving, we're understanding, and we hold a soft place for us to land when something doesn't go as expected. Right? Like when we fall off the train, you're gonna fall off the train. If you have ADHD, you're gonna get off the train and you're gonna get back on and you get off, you're gonna back on. But that doesn't mean you can't go to where you wanna go. It may take a little longer or not. You may get there faster, but it kinda just depends. And so I think that's how I differentiate like soft discipline versus hard. And especially as a woman with ADHD, like we definitely lean more into our
Mhm.
feminine and so that we can be more kind and nourishing and loving in the process. And I think that also is difficult for ambitious women, right? Because
Mhm.
it's more in your masculine to have that structure, to be able to follow through, to be able to be a decision maker, make fast decisions and things of that nature. Yeah, I think it's both an and for me always.
Mhm.
You can be disciplined, but when you have ADHD, it gets to be in a way that works with your energy and in a way that is compassionate.
I love that, especially because like you, I was always really disciplined as well. Couldn't understand why people lack motivation because I'm like, my whole life, everywhere that I got to, it was me pushing me. I didn't have mentors or, my parents pushing me to do anything. It was me. And I just couldn't understand like why can't you do it, right? Like it was all or nothing, right? If I was like in a workout program, if I was, doing either insanity or lifting or whatever, it was like in the meal prepping and the everything, right? And I'm like, I don't know how people don't just do what they want to do. And it wasn't until like I started more in like the coaching people and helping people and understanding that, people have different whys, they have different reasons that they're motivated or it might fluctuate, right? And then even with myself too as growing up and learning to like be compassionate for myself. I'm talking about like, giving myself grace because it was like I was used to that discipline. And if I failed at, or if I didn't do it well, then I would feel like I failed or I'm shaming myself for not doing it. So it's like, as I'm learning more about, like you said, that soft discipline of like having compassion, having grace for yourself and others, and knowing that you're not always going to be in that energy where everything is going to go right exactly how you planned it or how you wanted it to go. So I love like that differentiation. And like you mentioned as well about like being in your masculine versus your feminine. And I feel like a lot of us, especially in survival, have operated in our masculine, it's like you have to hustle, you got to give it all, you got to be like goal oriented. And all those are characteristics of the masculine. And like learning to be softer, and it's not a negative thing. It's learning to receive, learning to rest, learning to pause and really assess like my next move. And all that, you can still be strategic, you can still be moving towards goals, but you're doing it, like you said, in a more like compassionate, loving way where it gets to be intentional and you can still be successful, but also prevent burning out and actually enjoy the process and the journey.
That's very true. When we are in our survival mode, we're operating in our masculine for survival, right? And so I think that the more that I've been able to heal and regulate my nervous system, the easier it has been for me to be able to lean more in the softness and be okay with that. Because like yourself, I've always been full on, go all in hard. And I think I love that part of me. when I need you, let's go,
Yeah.
right? Or like,
You're like, when I need her,
I
yes.
yeah, I don't like I love that part of me, but I think it's also loving this other part of me too that also loves to have slow mornings and to be able to and just enjoy my presence and just to be able to connect with nature and know that that's also productive and that
Mhm.
I'll be okay as well, yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, I'd love to have like some quick rapid fire questions. So, what is the biggest myth about ADHD that you wish people would stop believing?
That we can be consistent. I think that's one of the myths. It's like if you have ADHD, you can't be consistent. That's just not true.
Yeah. What about one thing every high achieving woman with ADHD needs to hear?
You are exactly who you need to be, and you are so much more than who you think you are.
So, what is the best tool or strategy you recommend for follow through without burnout?
Working with your energy, identifying your energy levels, and planning for the different types of energy zones and working from there.
And if someone thinks they might have ADHD, what's the first step they need to take?
Consult with your primary doctor or make an appointment where you can, if you're currently seeing a therapist, have a conversation with your therapist about that. But I would say, yeah, consult with a professional.
Perfect. And before we wrap up, I have one final question. It's not a rapid fire, so you can definitely elaborate if you want. But what's one thing that you want listeners to take away from this conversation, especially women who are wondering if their brain works differently and if that's why they feel like everything is so hard?
That you're not alone, that you didn't know back then why your brain worked differently and why things seem more challenging and harder for you than it did with like your friend next to you, but that there are answers. And the best thing is that ADHD is actually the number one most treatable diagnosis. So when you are able to have the courage to be able to look within and say, hey, I think that my brain works differently and a formal diagnosis and being able to get the support that you need, your life can completely change. Why? Because ADHD is the number one most treatable diagnosis. And so that being said, when you get the help you need, it really does make a big difference.
I love that. And thank you so much, Brenda. This conversation was so needed. And thank you for like breaking down ADHD in a way that it's helpful and not just like the stereotype and helping women be able to see if this is them and if they need to take the next step. So, where can people find you and how can they work with you to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I You can connect with me on Instagram. So my handle is XO Brenda Miranda. That's usually where I hang out. And I know that you in the show notes we can put the link. So if
Mhm.
you're interested in learning more about working with me, I'm working with clients one on one for ADHD coaching. And it's not only for women with ADHD. If you suspect or you think that you may have ADHD, I also work with women as well. So you can just book a call for you to be able to learn more of how I can help you out.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again. I really love this conversation. And I mean, it was really helpful for me. And I know it's going to be so helpful for all the listeners. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you got exactly what you needed from this episode and that at least one thing clicked. One shift, one conversation, one thing you could actually try this week. And if you're listening and thinking, okay, but how do I apply this to my situation? That's where I come in. I work one-on-one with ambitious women of color who want to grow in their career, get promoted, negotiate more money, or make the next move without burning themselves out or losing their peace. We get clear on the strategy, work through what's really getting in the way, and build the success that actually fits your life. If this episode resonated and you want support, you can find me at jessicalynn-wellness.com or DM me on Instagram at jessicalynn-wellness. We'll chat about how I can help you thrive in your career and in your whole life. And if you know another ambitious woman of color who needs the conversation, share this episode with her. If you loved this episode or the podcast, leaving a quick rating or review helps more women find this space, and I appreciate it more than you know. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming next. You don't have to choose between the career and the life. You get to have both, and we're building that together. I'll see you next week. Vámonos.